The Diocese of Allentown. The faith was first planted here through the preaching of pioneer priests during the colonial era. It came of age with the formation of the diocese just as the Second Vatican Council was underway, and is still being written today under the leadership of its current apostle, Bishop Alfred Schlert.
It's so moving when the book of the Gospels is placed over your head, when the chrism is poured on your head, and you just feel the role of a successor of an apostle. That part is almost unfathomable to me.
This is the story of the bishops of America, the shepherds of the past and the shepherds of today, who through their callings and ministry carry the church into the future. It's also the story of their parish, their church, the cathedral. This is The Chair, an exploration of what it means to be an apostle in America. An hour north of Philadelphia and 90 minutes west of New York City is the beautiful Lehigh Valley. Allentown, Pennsylvania is the largest city in the region. It's also the sea city of the Diocese of Allentown, a community of faith with over 250,000 registered Catholics.
The story about the Diocese of Allentown is remarkable because it captures both the long history of the Catholic Church in the United States and its remarkable post-Vatican II transformations. So here's a diocese that can trace its earliest Catholic presence to Jesuit missionaries who came as itinerant missionaries throughout the Pennsylvania and New Jersey colonies, establishing some of the oldest places of worship in the eastern United States. And yet, at the same time, the Diocese of Allentown was born amid the changes of the Second Vatican Council. And it had an opportunity to embrace that moment of rebirth and renewal for the Catholic Church, both locally and globally.
Missionaries came from Canada and also from Maryland. Records show that they were in this area by the late 1600s. And it's the Jesuits that established one of the oldest churches in Pennsylvania, Most Blessed Sacrament, in the late 1700s.
Pennsylvania was a haven for religious tolerance, founded by William Penn, a Quaker, Quaker principles. So the early church, while it was experiencing prejudice, persecution, and violence, in most of the Northeast, in the New York area especially, the Quakers, in a sense, took the Catholics under their wings and established a very close kinship with them. The Quakers looked out for the Catholics, and the church had a fondness in turn for the Quakers as well. In the years that follow the Revolutionary War, the town of Allentown begins to steadily grow. Even though there is this small Catholic population there, the industrialization of the area brings profound changes to the Lehigh Valley. It transforms from a very rural, agricultural area that's dominated by German-speaking people into a very urbanized industrial power.
The Lehigh Valley historically has been known as an area that attracted many different immigrants, primarily because of the different industries that existed. The coal mines were not far away, and then with the advent of the steel industry, primarily located in Bethlehem, many people found employment in this area.
Over the decades, the faith was nurtured and expanded and grew with new waves of immigration, particularly with Southern and Eastern Europeans coming to find jobs and opportunities in the coal country. And we see the remarkable diversity of Catholicism reflected in the ethnic parishes that were built up in many of those small mining towns where several different parishes would sit strung along main streets to serve the different immigrant groups that would find themselves in these regions.
The Diocese of Allentown is established in 1961 But that's not to ignore the very rich centuries of history of Catholics in the region. Allentown is part of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, so it reaps many of the benefits of being part of that community. But there's a lot of change that's going on in the church. And the Lehigh Valley is beginning to grow, not just in terms of its industry, but in terms of its Catholic population. And there becomes a need to establish itself on its own.
The need for a new diocese had been discussed for a very long time. Back in the day of Bishop John Newman in the 1850s, there was talk about establishing a new diocese in Pottsville, thinking that that was going to be one of the great new regional centers. But plans for a new diocese got stalled until the post-World War II period, when they looked to break apart the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, which was growing by leaps and bounds.
When the Diocese of Allentown is established in 1961, it's in this enviable position, because even though it's a new diocese, it inherits a rich institutional presence. So it can build on this history and take this growth that has already taken place into the future. When the diocese is established, it has 150 parishes. It has more than 90 elementary schools and 14 diocesan high schools. The infrastructure was already in place.
The Diocese of Allentown, being established in 1961, was able to readily welcome the reforms of Vatican II, especially with the emphasis placed on the local church. Since the diocese was broken off from Philadelphia, a larger archdiocese, the Diocese of Allentown was able to focus on the needs and concerns of the people in that region, which differed from the area of the urban center of Philadelphia. Since the Vatican Council wanted to make sure that there was more of a primacy given to local churches, Allentown coming of age during the time of the council was very providential.
When the Diocese of Allentown is established, Bishop Joseph McShay, who is an auxiliary bishop in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, is installed as the first bishop of Allentown. Bishop McShay attends some of the sessions in Vatican II, so he's keenly aware of the importance of care for the poor, care for others, these new social services that need to be implemented in our church.
Under Bishop McShay's leadership, Operation Rice Bowl is initiated within the diocese as a fundraising program for those suffering from famine in Africa.
Little cardboard boxes that were distributed in the parishes, and children or people would take them around and ask for coins. This becomes such popular effort. In 1976, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops adopts it as a national program.
In the latter half of the 20th century, Allentown, along with much of the northeastern United States, began suffering from deindustrialization. Now, this causes many of the factories and corporations headquartered in the Lehigh Valley to either close or move. The diocese has had to adjust in the wake of these changes in order to care for the Catholics in this region.
We are in a very changing segment of Pennsylvania. Allentown, Bethlehem, and Easton, which are made up collectively called the Lehigh Valley, was a very industrial area. And so it was a great hardship on the people. But to the ingenuity of the people in the diocese, they retooled, they learned new skills. And so now we are a hub of service industries, of healthcare, and of higher education.
Since its founding, the Cathedral of St Catherine's has been the spiritual home and center of liturgical activity for Allentown's Catholics.
One of Bishop McShay's lasting legacies in the Diocese of Allentown is the Cathedral of St Catherine's. Interestingly, the area, the plot of land on which St Catherine's now sits, was private land that the church had purchased from a widow, and they took the carriage and stable house and they built a chapel there. It's kind of poignant to think about the fact that little did they know, they built this little chapel which eventually would become the seat for the Bishop of Allentown.
The Cathedral of St Catherine of Siena was built as a parish church in 1954, but became a cathedral in 1961. And you can really read the history of the building as well as the diocese by reading the architecture. So when you have a sort of mid-century modern building like this as the cathedral, it's a hint that we're talking about a place where the Catholic population really grew and was vibrant and demanded its own diocese because of how vibrant it is. And that transition from parish church to cathedral is really one that took place over time with multiple renovation and renewal campaigns. And the interior has an Italian influence. This is because the patroness, St. Catherine of Siena, is from Italy. And we see symbols of that throughout the building.
In 1980, Bishop Joseph McShay commissioned Dana Van Horn to paint two images depicting scenes from the life of St. Catherine of Siena. On the one side, we see Catherine bringing back Pope Gregory XI from Avignon back to Rome. The other mural depicts Catherine defending Pope Urban VI, one of Gregory's successors, as the legitimate pope. This is, of course, during a time of great confusion as to who was the real pope. Both of the paintings are interesting because while they appear to be frescoes, much like many of the frescoes are in churches in Rome, they were painted on different panels of canvas, and then they were affixed to the wall. St. Catherine of Siena plays a very important role for Catholics in the diocese because it really shows their connection to the Pope. This is a diocese that understands its uniqueness in light of where it plays a role in the wider universal church.
The building edifice and interior is not grand in stature. It really makes very good use of materials, noble materials, to signal that this place is very special and very important. Marble, gold, and finely crafted candlesticks with the Apostolic Succession shields and site-specific murals. In the great tradition of the church, and in the elevation of this parish church to a cathedral, they really employed a liturgical artistry program to transform what was sort of a humble parish church into a cathedral fitting of the liturgical actions that take place in that kind of house of worship. So the cathedra is one of the elements that had to be added to really make this a functioning cathedral. The head of the see of the new diocese needs a seat. And so we get the name cathedral from the word cathedra because that's where the seat is. This cathedra is made of marble. It's red, so it has that reference, that sort of Sienese color. It is stately and solid. And it's also picked up in color on the marble shown in the murals in the sanctuary.
My whole vocation developed in here in some ways. I remember coming here as an altar server. They had annual altar server appreciation, and the bishop would come and he'd hand out certificates. So that was my first time in the cathedral. My seat changed. As a high school student, we sat back where all the lay people sit, and then as a seminarian, we would sit on the side pews, and then as a priest, we'd sit in center pews. And now as a bishop, I sit in the cathedra. And the view from each seat was different, not only architecturally and artistically, but also vocationally. It's been a tremendous experience of growth to be in this cathedral.
The cathedra, or chair, inside St. Catherine's Cathedral represents Bishop Schlert's authority as the fifth apostle of Allentown.
I grew up not far from here, actually, in Easton, Pennsylvania. I grew up with a mother and father, of course, and my brother, and went to Catholic school my whole life, St. Jane's School in Easton and Notre Dame High School in Easton. So it was there that I first I was exposed to the faith through the religious in the schools and, of course, at home. About sophomore year in high school, I went to one of the priests who was a teacher of mine, and I started to discern with him a call to the priesthood. So after graduating from high school, I went to St. Charles Seminary in Philadelphia, and then from there, I was selected to go to study at the Pontifical Roman Seminary in Rome, which is the seminary for the Diocese of Rome, and at the Pontifical Lateran University. Well, ordination day, September 19th, 1987, actually took place right here where we're sitting, right here on this, almost on this exact spot. It was a beautiful day, as of course you remember it. I was ordained by Bishop Thomas J. Welsh, who was the second Bishop of Allentown, and of course he's one of my predecessors.
On June 27, 2017, Pope Francis appointed Alfred Schlert as the next bishop for the Diocese of Allentown.
The day I was notified that I would be a bishop was rather interesting. Every bishop seems to have an interesting story about that. So I was actually in a meeting of our diocesan finance council. My phone buzzed, and I looked at it, and it was a number from Washington, D.C. And I thought, maybe I better take this, because the see had been vacant for a number of months, and the nuncio was on the phone, and he identified himself, and he said, "Are you alone?" So I thought, well, this will not be a regular phone call. So I said, yes, I can be in my office in just a moment. So I went into the office, and he said, I have the good news to tell you. So I thought, well, this is good. He's telling me who the new bishop is. And he said that the Holy Father has selected you to be, and I thought, oh my, I wonder where I'm going, to be the Bishop of Allentown. And so I paused. So I even said, of Allentown, of my own diocese? And he said, yes, you're already doing it as the administrator. So that was my call and how it went for me. The day of my ordination as a bishop, I remember to see the cathedral so full of priests and bishops and religious and our deacons and the lay people. Not because I was getting ordained, but because it was a moment of joy in the church. Of course, knowing so many people who were here from a lifetime of living in this diocese made it very comfortable. My hope is that the thing I would be best at is sanctifying. Because sanctifying prepares a person for eternal life. Now, it also needs, of course, preaching. And so preaching must always be done, first of all, in conformity to the Church's teachings. It must always be orthodox. It must always be the gospel of truth without compromise. It's also a difficult time to be a priest, a deacon, a religious, and a lay person, because the whole church is under scrutiny. I look at St. Athanasius, who arguably was a bishop at the worst time in the church, when almost the whole church fell into heresy. But he did his job. He didn't choose to be a bishop at that time, and he probably would have tried to avoid it. But he grasped it. He wasn't asked when to serve, and so he did it, and he embraced it. And that's what I try to do every day as best I can, and I think my brother bishops are doing that too.